All right. Well, thank you, Meredith, and thank you for starting the recording. And thank you, everyone, for coming to the 2025 pre-field season meeting. It's really exciting to see you all here. I've met a few of you, but for those of you who haven't met me or maybe haven't received my incessant emails about the vessel matrix, I am MB Armstrong, and I'm a Knauss Fellow with NOAA's Arctic Research Program and co-lead of the Field Operations Community of Practice. And so first, I want to thank all of our presenters and investigators for contributing to this pre-field season meeting, as well as our co-sponsors, the Marine Ecosystems and Sea Ice Communities of Practice, and of course, my collaborators in the Field Operations Community of Practice team, Renee Crane, Katie Smith, and David Allen. Next slide, please. So our goals for this meeting include first, providing an open space to be able to share information and identify common themes or potential places to work together during planned field activities. We also want to improve communication and engagement with Alaska and Arctic communities, share community-based observing activities as well as concerns, and also share communication plans to avoid any conflict between researchers and Alaskan and Arctic coastal communities. And we also want to make it clear that this doesn't necessarily replace researchers being in direct contact with communities prior to and while planning and conducting their research, but rather adds to the communication and knowledge sharing among us and the communities. So next slide, please. Oops. We are also super excited to announce that the 2025 Research Vessel Matrix is available, recently launched, and I will go ahead and pop the link in the chat here as well, so people, if you haven't already seen it, have access to it. But this tool was developed in 2016 in the hopes that researchers would use this information to coordinate activities, that communities would use it to understand what vessels are in their waters and how to contact them if necessary. Since then, there have been a litany of modifications added to it to improve accessibility and usability, including a calendar view, organizations of activities by region, and also an inclusion of a broader range of scientific activities, including mapping and fishing surveys. So if you notice anything that needs updating, or if there is anything missing from the research vessel matrix that I didn't quite grab, please feel free to email that email that's down there. It might be cut off for you, but I can also pop my email in the chat towards the end, and you can email me directly with any updates. I'd love to hear from you. Next slide, please. And so there's, in addition to the website, there's also various other places that you can find information about the matrix and also movements and updates to the matrix. And those are all listed here. I will also pop the link in the chat for the newsletter. So signing up for the newsletter, you will get email alerts when the matrix is updated, and so this ensures access to the most recent and accurate information. Those will go out kind of as an ad needed basis, but at least on a biweekly basis. Next slide, please. The next exciting thing to highlight is that the mooring matrix is also accessible through the same exact website as the research vessel matrix on IARPC collaborations. And so similarly, by sharing a list of mooring locations, we hope to inform the scientific community and vessel operators of the locations of all moorings presently deployed in the Bering, Chukchi, and Beaufort Seas to reduce the risk of damage to the moorings and facilitate more collaborative science activities. And so these locations are also periodically updated to ensure accuracy. Again, if you notice anything missing from here, we try to be pretty comprehensive, but please feel free to reach out to the field operations email or my personal email. Next slide, please. And so considerations for research in the Arctic generally. Federally funded Arctic researchers are expected to follow SHARE principles for conducting research in the Arctic. These principles highlight the importance of researchers to sustain and build relationships, provide a respectful work environment, be accountable to the commitments that they make, and be stewards of the Arctic environment and communicate effectively and respectively, particularly when working with communities in the Arctic and engaging with Indigenous experts. Research should be an enriching experience for everyone involved, including the people on the research team and the people in the Arctic. So the next slide is going to give you all a list of useful materials to reference before and while doing research in the Arctic, and I will go ahead and pop those in the chat as well. As a note on this, the US NSF's Arctic Fieldwork Update for 2024 is going to be linked in the chat, but the 2025 will be published, or the 2025 update will be published soon. So keep an eye out for that. And then last slide, or next slide. My last slide for now. I also want to make another plug for the daily Arctic Daily Cruise Report template. The goal of this is to standardize cruise reports, archive them, and distribute them to a wider audience. This template can be found at this link here, which I can go ahead and pop in the chat in just a second. You can use the template and then send to the email that is listed at the very top there. And also feel free to reach out to the field operations email with any other additional questions, comments, or concerns. I will go ahead and pop those links that I promised in the chat. And as I'm doing that, I will turn it over to David Allen to introduce the flow of today's meeting.
Excellent. Thanks, MB. So as you can see on your screen, we are going to, well, first of all, super excited to have you on this call. My name is David Allen. I'm a program manager with NOAA's Arctic Research Program that sits within the Global Ocean Monitoring and Observing Program in the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, as well as a co-lead of the Field Operations Community of Practice. As you can see on the screen, we're going to do a quick info item. Oh, whoa, okay, there we go. A quick info item on the most recent developments with Mount Spur, and then we're going to go first into the first tranche of presentations that will be hosted by MB with a short Q&A to follow. Then group 2 presentations that will be hosted by Katie and a short Q&A to follow, and then an open discussion. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So I think it's important to note this is a little bit, I think there's obviously a great deal of volcanic activity and a great deal of seismic activity in Alaska that you're all aware of. But I've noticed that several people who are doing regular Arctic and Alaska work weren't necessarily aware of the fact that very recently in March, due to seismic activity as well as gaseous emanations from the caldera, Mount Spur was put into this yellow advisory category back in March, and statements were more likely than not that this volcano would erupt in the next year, and really I believe it was days to months. And this volcano has erupted in the last 75 years at least 3 times, or actually, excuse me, 4 times. So 1953, as well as 3 times in 1992. And based on previous experience with this volcano, an eruption of Mount Spur will likely result in the release of volcanic ash. It's about 80 miles from Anchorage, as you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, with Cook Inlet in the center, Mount Spur on your left-hand side, and Anchorage relatively small, but on the right-hand side there. So depending on the prevailing winds, we expect that you'll have about a 2.5 hour period if the winds are going in the correct direction for possible ashfall in Anchorage. And this may result in disruptions to aircraft and air travel, as well as logistics that pass through Anchorage, which is why we're raising this. I think the last time in 1992, the airport was closed for about 20 hours in Anchorage. And there's also additional possible disruptions to more rural communities in Alaska as well. If we can move to the next slide. So 100%, this is not meant to alarm anyone, and you're all chief scientists and PIs who have in Alaska residents who have lived and worked in Alaska for a long time. So this is not meant to raise any panic. This is just another possibility that may possibly impact your logistics, as well as travel as staff and teams in and out of Anchorage, as well as the possible transit of your various cargo that's being delivered to MOB and demob sites. So I just wanted to make sure that you monitor the situation and the alert level. You can do that through a number of different pathways, including the Alaska Volcano Observatory, which has its own dedicated page, which we can pop into the chat here. The Alaska Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, and that can actually send you alerts, as well as the USGS Volcano Notification Service, which also has an alert function. In the event of an eruption, the National Weather Service Volcanic Ash Advisory Center will track the travel of that ash cloud, and also provide additional updates and work with FAA and other authorities to close airspace and manage any potential interruptions. So I guess the bottom line here, certainly don't panic, but please plan and hedge as you always do to avoid disruptions to the extent possible. And now with that info item entered into the record, I first will ask whether there are any questions or any clarifications that folks might want to bring to the fray. And if not, I will turn back to MB for the first round of presentations. Thanks.
All right. I think I've waited the appropriate amount of time for questions to pop up, but if anything does, please feel free to pop it in the chat and one of us will respond. This will be our overview of presentations today. So we are going to split it up into two groups. Questions will be taken at the end of each group in its entirety. We'll have a short Q&A session, but we want to keep things moving along so everyone has an adequate amount of time to present. So with that said, I would like to introduce our first set of presentations, starting with Jackie Greibmeyer and Seth Danielson. So I think next slide, please, and I'll hand it over to, I believe Jackie is here. So.
Sure. Thank you very much for putting this on in the introduction. Seth is not here today, and I'm doing this on behalf of the work that we do with our project from NSF, the first one, and on the second one for Katrin Eichen, who's the chief scientist for the pending Sikuliaq cruise. So for the first one, this is confirmed. This is the Canadian Coast Guard ship Sir Wilfrid Laurier. It's been going on since 1998 in one form or the other, but officially since 2012 under NSF support. It is a combination with Canada, as I said, Canada's three ocean, and you can see the flags and the funding associated with that program. Next, I guess you have control of it. Thanks. So the cruise is set. We are going to be mobbing in Nome on the 15th, 16th of July. We depart Nome on the 17th, and we go down to the DB01. You can see on the right on the graphic, and then we proceed those time series stations. Some of those are 35 years that we've been occupying them through various funding sources, NSF, NOAA, and PRB others. And then, but as part of this observing program with NSF support, then we go north into DB02, which is in the Chiricahua Basin, run those lines. We have standard stations, which are green when we do all these process collections and everything from physics through chemistry and biology. And the red dots are where we just drop down a CTD for the sensor information. So as far as location, we'll go all the way up to DB03, 4, and 5 in the Chukchi Sea, and then we offload in Utiavik. Currently, the Laurier this year will be heading out to Japan for a conservation program, and then they'll swing over and pick us up on their first leg before they go to do their work up in the Canadian Arctic. We do have communication and outreach plans, as you can see on there. We have pre and post discussions, report back specifically to the AEWC, and as well as we communicate with the coastal communities. We've had Bering Strait Science Talks, as Gay has kindly set that up when we have an opportunity to do that, and meet with the schools when we can during the summer period, depending on the timing if they're still in classes. In Utqiagvik, we've had community discussions there. In both places, we can offer the tour of the ship. It's up to the Canadian captain to do that. We have developed a podcast that hasn't yet landed yet on their open site, and we do have interviews with the local radio stations. Next. So when the mission is to the DBO, I think all of you know this, the Distributed Biological Observatory. It's a change detection array. And what we're looking at monitoring biophysical responses to environmental drivers in the Pacific Arctic. And many of you may know it's been expanded, and the example has been taken on. The Atlantic DBO had their activities going, started in 2024, and they have put together plans for 2025. Joint occupation by multiple parts of that group over in the Eastern Arctic area of the European and Canadians and the Baffin Bay, Canada basins, and then some work with the Korean colleagues on the developing East Siberian DBO just outside the Russian EEZ and the East Siberian Sea. But the goals of the program are to look at the changing physical drivers, and we use satellite information on the sea ice extent because we get out there every year almost within a day in July, and have been doing that for the last couple of decades. We're obviously seeing increasing seawater warming. So those are key things, aspects to biological community changes. And that's ranging from the prey that these animals are consuming and why they come up like the gray whales all the way from Baja, and to the associated predators. And we've got bowhead whales, obviously, and walrus for the benthic feeding part. We have a standardized sampling design. So we have a minimum set of collections that are made on these DBO stations. As I said, it was actually initiated in 2010 with NOAA support on the ship. And then since then, it's been 2012 on this particular cruise with NSF. We have international partners, and I don't think they're going to be explained here, but the Koreans go out on the Aeron. They'll be out there in August this year, and they occupy a subset of these DBO lines, just to put that in there. And the Mirai will be out there with Japan doing a couple of the DBO lines also. Then we have the 8th DBO data sharing meeting in Kopri in November. So we're looking at key predator-prey interactions. So briefly, summary activities, like most ships, we have underway observations going on. So there's lots of sensors of surface water as we transit throughout in between stations and on the way from Canada, coming up from Victoria all the way through the Canadian Arctic. We do have standard seabird and marine mammal surveys. That's part of what the DBO has. Water column, CTD for the standard measurements, temperature, salinity, nutrients. We have biooptical studies that Karen Frey does and provides that data sets also to NASA for satellite calibration. We're looking, the bongo nets, the zooplankton work is done by our Canadian colleagues, and they're looking at composition and genetics. And then for the seafloor, we take that on with the grabs. We're looking at the time series of macrofauna. When the opportunity arises with trawls, that's primarily on Sikuliak. We look at sediment grain size, chlorophyll for food supply, carbon and nitrogen. And on this cruise, we have a drop camera for looking at benthic imaging. And that's when we started seeing some of the fish came up when the 217 to 218, when there was no sea ice south of St. Lawrence Island. And we could actually pick some of the smaller fish up on the camera, which we normally don't see. But we are seeing a lot more swimming around krill on the bottom, which is an indication that there's more, at least informally, that there's more krill going into the system, being carried in the Pacific water northward. Next. So on this next one, why is it important? We are, like many of us, are all looking at those changing the sea ice conditions, temperature, current regimes. That's another ADCP on the cruise that's also collected. So looking at status and change. These zooplankton, as we all know, benthic organisms are very important for prey. That's why these big marine animals are so productive in the Pacific Arctic. And they migrate thousands and thousands of kilometers, some of them, to reach that area. And those changes of which there's in their palate and their prey base are also impacting where and when, and the changing timing of when they're coming has, or the mismatch that's happening that has an impact on their body conditions. We're looking at the biodiversity conditions that we're looking at food security topics. So that's an important harmful algal blooms, looking at the eDNA content for biodiversity and ocean acidification measurements. And those are being made by our Canadian colleagues. And so we do have the seabird and marine seabird work is with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So Liz Labuncie, who's online. And then we have a collaboration with NASA for the satellite products and they have their own website that put those forward, and the data are available behind that. Next. So then when we do collaborations, our core one that we have now is with our university system here, Clark University with Karen Fry and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as I've mentioned already. And then our Canadian colleagues come in with the physical oceanography, the zooplankton work, some the chemistry. So it's a very much a shared collections that go on. So we divide and conquer on that. Unfortunately, the birthing space is a maximum of 16. We split that up between the Canadians and the Americans. And this year they kindly let us take 11 of them because of the fact that we had to cancel our cruise last year due to engine issues. Is there space for other equipment? Space is pretty limited on them. In the sampling, we don't do trawling because we don't have that capability, but we can potentially collect other measurements for folks. We collaborate. Yes, we collaborate if we can make the collections. I've done that with harmful algal blooms and other measurements that we can take our team collecting those for Kathy Lefebvre and others for both water column and sediments. When we, as Gay knows, when we get in Nome, when we offload, we'll be talking about giving a pre-cruise talk, and then in Utqiagvik, when we offload it, if there's an opportunity, we proceed with those connections also. Share data within the network, and I think many of you know that there are multiple cruises, and that's what the meeting in the fall will have those data sets provided as part of our 8th DBO data workshop. I think that's it. Data be collected. So I've already mentioned the key parameters there. These are links, all the work that we collect, including the Canadians related to the data samples, are loaded into the Arctic Data Center. The NASA data is on their webpage, and it's dedicated to the DBO there. And the North Pacific Pelagic Seabird database has all the seabird data. We try to follow through our connection with these archives with the FAIR and CARE principles. And if you want more information about the DBO, where to get to those data sets, it links you directly to the Arctic Data Center is at that website there that we manage here at the Chesapeake Biological Lab. So do you want questions now, or should I go through the second one? Because it's also affiliated with the DBO.
You can go ahead with the second one. Yeah, we'll take all the questions.
Because I'll streamline that. So we currently have the Sikuliaq in a pending mode right now with discussions between NSF and NOAA. This is usually led in the past with NOAA and Office of Naval Research and NASA kind of coordination and some involvement for NSF in the past. You can see on the left there, Katrin Eichen is the chief scientist from the Arctic Marine Biodiversity Observing Network. You can see on the right what the acronyms mean. On the left, Lee is online, will be the co-chief scientist if this cruise goes forward under the DBO that we have with a NOAA support on that particular cruise. Phyllis Stabenow, who's online too for the EcoFoci, and you can see how the acronym is spelled out there, Ecosystem and Fisheries Oceanography. And they have a longer time series than we even have for the DBO, but it's 4 teams on this cruise, which makes for very efficient activities. We share and conquer, and then I'll be on there also. But this time I'm stepping back and I'm just going to do science. Okay, next. So this cruise is tentatively from August 13th to the September 6th, or maybe reduced in that. We get on in Nome, would get on ideally on the 13th of August. And here you can actually see this is exactly near the path that we would do for the Sir Wilfrid Laurier. We'll go down and do the DBO1 southwest of St. Lawrence Island. Kind of gives you the dates. We'll go to the Chirikov Basin. There are some moorings. A lot more mooring turnaround in this cruise with both what Phyllis has in there. She's got that M8 mooring in there. We got a sediment trap on it. There's a lot of sensors on there. And then you go to DBO2, which is Chirikov Basin. There's also the Catherine Burchak's acoustic mooring is in there. When you go through Bering Strait there, you get to the DBO3. We have included on there the south to north, what are called our really longest time series, University of Tennessee, when we were there a long time ago. And then the DBO3 line that goes to the coast. You head up and you go then up to, we do the Icy Cape line. You can follow the lines 8-20-22. You can see that, 8-22. August 22nd. Then we go over the DBO4, we go DBO5 off of Utqiagvik. We go out and do some work on the slope area, swing around and get another time series station on the outer, in the Chirikov Basin, the Chukchi, and then head south. So similarly, this is a pre and post cruise discussions. This has been presented to the AWC, and they have a positive view of this. There are communications, there are daily communications that come from the ship, and that's handled by our NOAA colleagues there with the Alaska Coastal Communities. We are planning to do a straight science talk if Galtic goes well with, if this cruise goes forward. We'll have the community tours, same type of thing. And if the timing is right, we can go in the schools, but they have to be in session. Next. Oh, yes. Yes. So the science questions, this is to look at the status of biodiversity and change at these time series. Now we're looking, we have oceanographic sampling, but we have all those moorings, at least 15 moorings. We turn around Seth's Chukchi Ecosystem Observatory mooring in the northern part of the Chukchi Sea, as well as all the moorings that Phyllis has, and then obviously the satellite observation. So it's a component along with all the pop-up buoys that maybe Phyllis throws over the side and other measurements that can be made. Depending on the year, it could be put gliders off or on the ship. So the goals are to look at the environmental drivers influences biological communities, to look at food security topics. So we have a flow through IFCB in the system because it's very nice. Obviously, the Kuliak is built for science, so that is run full time. And actually, data evaluations are brought by Dawn Anderson at Woods Hole or Evie Vachon, and then provides those on a weekly basis. And if there's any issue that there's a high level of toxic bloom going on, then she makes connections directly through a network with the coastal community public medical folks. And it's not something that we add on to from the ship, just providing that access information. So that, as I said, provided for health purposes. And then looking at the changes of sea ice and particularly seawater and currents on predator-prey interactions and migrations. So similar type of underway observations. The additional things are the fact that we have looking at larval fish in the zooplankton collections there. A lot more dedicated work on the eDNA component. That's under the AMBON program. Harmful amble bloom monitoring that, as I mentioned there. A lot of carbon components, looking at ocean acidification aspects that's being undertaken. And there's this year, if all goes well, then we would go out with this ROV that Seth has. So we'll have we'll be able to use that for looking for the imaging system, for the work up in this Chukchi Ecosystem Observatory. But we would do this on a subset of all the DBO lines as we go up. So this would be a great compare and contrast seasonality with what we're seeing along the bottom. Seafloor, similar type things, but this gives an opportunity to do the sampling for sediments for harmful algal blooms, also to do experiments in the coal rooms that we don't have on the other ship. And then the moorings, and I think Phyllis will mention probably something more on that, physical, biophysical, and passive acoustic sensors. Next. So if the Kuliak goes forward, similar type research is important, understanding the ecosystem and why these changes, what's driving the changes and what impact that has. Well, fisheries right now with the low level of sea ice, we might have warmer water up there. They'll bring up those commercial fish. What potential that might be for community competition with some of the bigger upper tropics. And then the zooplankton benthic animals as a prey base. That's why these bigger animals are going up to this sector, to both the zooplankton for big animals like bowheads and other humpback whales. That's the other thing that's happening. We see a lot more subarctic species coming into that region. And so if you go north of Bering Strait, you have a whole cacophony of water column feeders, benthic feeders, all kind of mixing, matching, which normally would be seasonally separated, but now they're in one area. So there's competition potential. are actually. Biodiversity, this is part of looking at function and productivity of the system. And as I already said, the food security topics are pretty big on the harmful algal blooms, that real-time information that goes out to coastal communities, particularly related to their food supply, on eating traditional foods. eDNA for the biodiversity studies and ocean acidification, as I mentioned. And then similarly, we have a seabird and marine mammal, depending on the time, for on the deck, on the bridge, and then obviously doing NASA products are very important for the program. Next. So if all goes well, so areas of collaboration, this is an expedition between NOAA's Pacific Marine Environmental Lab, the National Marine Fisheries Service is in there, UMC's our team here, and Fish and Wildlife Service. It's at capacity right now if it was a go, but if a cruise happens, but there's always potential for discussions because we're keeping a few spaces open for a coastal community member. Possibly space for equipment or other collections. The answer is yes, possibly. Can you make your data available? We do on this program as well as the other one I mentioned earlier. Opportunities for local communities. Yes, we took the past mayor of Diomede on the cruise last year, and it was great. I very much loved doing benthic work, and that was very well appreciated. But it also provides connection of if they're able to come part-time, can come on and off by boat. But she was able to stay on for the whole cruise, which was great. Ongoing within the network, so the collaboration for moorings, and we've done that before. Picked up glider if somebody's glider needed to be picked up or deployed. Next. And as far as data to be collected on it's similar type in the surface, but even more so up there. Is that URL? Which one is URL live? The DBO one is alive. The NASA is live still. Is that what you're asking, David? I don't know which one you're saying. The MBON one, the National Centers, and we've got a DBO one coming on. There is a site, but trying to get that connected with the National Centers for Environmental Information for directly as a landing page like we have with the Arctic Data Center. Again, U.S. Fish and Wildlife will have somebody on board. Oh, no, the IFCB is not live yet. So I'm glad. Thank you, Tom, for answering that. And then the data sets are going into OBIS for Arctic Marine Biodiversity. AMBON data is going directly into OBIS. And then there's also data going to the National Center for Biotechnology Information. That tends to be more of the genetics data and following the FAIR and CARE principles. Next. I think that is it for me. Oh, yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jackie. It was great to hear about both of those. And folks, feel free to start popping questions in the chat, and we will have a brief Q&A after this group of presenters. So we have 2 more presentations. So, but yeah, please feel free to continue the discussion in the chat. But in the meantime, I would like to welcome Phyllis Stabino and Heather Tabasola to talk about the EcoFoci Spring Mooring Cruise. So thank you both. Phyllis, I think you're muted if you're...
You are
Okay.
correct. Could you go back one, please? Okay, so FOSI has 2 mooring cruises each year. The first is in spring, the second is in fall. The spring cruise sailed, next slide. The spring cruise sailed on the 24th, on time, etc. The plan at the right was what we were hoping to do. The ice had retreated quite a bit early on, and we thought we might be able to get pretty far north. As I say, they're out there right now. M4, which is just north of the Pribilof Islands, has ice. And that's as far north as the cruise could get. So we just did the southern part. One of the parts of the cruise I'll talk a little bit about later is the conditions we're seeing right there. Next slide. The next cruise is in the fall, and Next slide. It begins on the 25th of August. It's a 25-day cruise this year, which is a bit longer than usual. And it's Kodiak to Kodiak, which is unusual. So this is the goal. This cruise plan may change if the Arctic cruise does not happen. Next slide. Okay. Scientific questions are pretty far-ranging. The big thing is this maintains the Bering Sea's long-term moorings. M2 was deployed for the 31st year on the cruise just late last week. So it's an annual survey of baseline measurements from physics to chemistry, CO2, etc. The simple goals are to turn around the mooring and to occupy the 70-meter isobath and other standard measurements, doing the full suite of measurements from CTDs, bongos, calvettes, and eDNA, CO2, etc. So as I say, the cruise has done the primary moorings. They're now going to do a number of samples in Bering Canyon, etc. The fall cruise does all the moorings, M2 to M8. As I said, if the cruise on the Sikuliaq does not go, we will push the cruise further north, the fall mooring cruise, to do both M8 and M14, which is the northern mooring north of St. Lawrence. We will not have ship time to go into the Chukchi and do any of those. So we're preparing for that. Excuse me. Next slide. So as I say, this is a baseline for fisheries. It's important to both management. For instance, the peak meeting is being held at the same time as this meeting. Yesterday, we presented the physics and lower trophic levels at that meeting. The consensus is the Bering Sea is odd this year. The southern Bering Sea is very warm. And Kelly Kearney gave a presentation of MOM6, which she predicts also that it's warm. The northern Bering Sea is expected to be closer to normal, but it's real hard to tell what we're going to get there. What has happened is the winds have been out of the north, pushing the ice southward. So we have large areas of no ice in the very northern Bering Sea. At M4, which is just north of the Pribilof Islands, there's heavy ice. We've done 4 sections across that, measuring CTDs. The bongos did not work well because there's so much soup in the water, so to speak, that the bongos become clogged. What comes out of it is like pudding. But we have those measurements, including eDNA, etc. And I think they could be very, very interesting once they're all processed on exactly what the system is up there this year. This is an abnormal thing. The south is so warm that it melts the ice at M4. The system is warm enough that it's not making ice in the north. And so you end up with this halo or this kind of donut going through M4, M5, and M8. And so exactly what will happen. The 2 northern moorings are still in the water, and hopefully they'll be recovered in the fall, and they'll give us a story of what's happening this year in the Bering Sea shelf. As I say, the peak meeting was yesterday. The consensus was it is odd, and exactly what that means for the fisheries system is unknown. The peak meeting is the first of the meetings that are run by AFSC to begin the management season of trying to understand what's happening in this system so that they can prepare for fish quotas, et cetera, on the system. Next slide. So I've already mentioned the moorings are the primary purpose of these two cruises, but the second thing is the 70-meter and to form the spring measurements of how the Bering Sea shelf and parts of the Gulf of Alaska are changing. The data is public as soon as we process it, and you can find it on the website here. And as I say, the data is public, and yeah, you can. It takes us a while to process it, but you can request any data. Go ahead. This is just a short thing about the Arctic cruise that Jackie already talked about. Our main part on this cruise is ecosystem measurements, but it's also the deployment of about 15 moorings. Next slide. If the cruise does not happen, that section to the southwest of St. Lawrence Island, we will attempt to do that on the fall Dyson cruise, and the mooring just to the northeast of St. Lawrence is M14, and we'll do that. M8 is on the southern DB01, and it will be deployed for the 22nd year this year. So we're looking at real long-term observations to see how this ecosystem is changing. Next slide. So there's been a number of cancellations of cruises this year at PMEL and AFSC. The two of the cruises that have been canceled, one, they were focused on the Gulf of Alaska, but they were canceled because of lack of funds. So you can see the big cruises for us right now are the Dyson cruise, the spring mooring cruise, and the fall mooring cruise. And then there's a late larval spring ichthyoplankton cruise that AFSC leads on the Dyson. It's directly after the spring mooring cruise. This year, it is focused in the Gulf of Alaska. Next slide. So the number of berths depends. There's usually at least one berth on it that we can have. For instance, the spring mooring cruise, there were some berths. We usually have a bird person on board, but there was no one available this year from U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Both of our cruises are very interdisciplinary. Both EcoFoci, there's a genetics eDNA person on board, Alaska Fisheries Science Sensor, Natalie, CO2 from AFSC is on board. And like I say, there's almost always a bird person on board, and the Marine Mammal Lab sends people out. So both the spring and fall mooring crews are heavily integrated with wide ranges of measurements that are largely available. How many berths are available? You need to contact us. We never know. Usually we're pretty full, but the fall mooring cruise usually has a berth or two available. The other equipment, the moorings usually have equipment from other groups on board. If you have an interest in deploying an instrument on the moorings, you need to contact me. And the only requirement is, that we collaborate in how we integrate the mooring or the piece of equipment into the mooring so it doesn't affect the structure of the mooring. The equipment on board the ship, it ranges from yeah, it's a wide range of equipment that can be put on there, IFCB, et cetera, et cetera. The data is public. And so as soon as we have it processed, which the moorings take longer, the samples, have to be calibrated, et cetera. Usually people walk off the ship with a preliminary data from the CTDs, but the final data usually shows up in about 6 months. So we work where possible with Indigenous communities and other local communities. But on the whole, we sail in and out of Kodiak or Dutch Harbor. And we try to work with schools, et cetera, when we're there at the appropriate time. Yeah, as I say, these are heavily integrated collaborative cruises with people from a wide range of specialties and from a wide range of universities, et cetera, that there's space on board. Next. Go back. Heather, is there anything I missed?
I don't think so. Communications, and we'll work with folks as necessary. And for the Arctic Collaborative, I'll set up that email template again for the team and the general email list, and we'll get that going. So, yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much, both Phyllis and Heather. We will keep it rolling. So I'm happy to welcome Jim Murphy to speak to the Northern Bering Sea Ecosystem and Surface Trawl Survey.
Well, can you hear me fine?
Yep.
Okay, good. I have some problems with my microphone here, so just wanted to make sure everything is coming across well. Yeah, so we're planning to conduct the Northern Bering survey again with the surface trawl and ecosystem research focuses, and in August and September, centered around the September month. I put a lot of authors here because there's actually quite a few folks that are involved both with the collection of the data, but also with the analysis and interpretation. So it takes a team, a fairly large team, to pull these surveys off every year. Next slide. We'll start. This will be a survey conducted on the chartered fishing vessel, the Northwest Explorer. We'll start and end in Dutch Harbor, and we'll have a port call in Nome halfway through. The dates are between August 30th and September 23. And this grid here kind of shows the typical station grid. I've added some of our spatial strata that we use to kind of organize some of the stations that we typically occupy on the survey. Yeah, I'm not sure if this communication outreach plan is very helpful, but I did want to list that we communicate the results of the survey through multiple agencies. So the North Pacific Anadromous Fish Commission is where we communicate our survey plans, and that's an international commission that is largely focused on salmon research. The Pacific Salmon Commission is specifically focused on Yukon River Chinook and chum salmon, and those two species are managed through an international process because Chinook and chum salmon originate from both the Canadian portion of the drainage and the U.S. So there's the Yukon River Panel and the Joint Technical Committee. So a lot of our information kind of does get communicated through the scientific community and stakeholders through the Pacific Salmon Commission, and also the Alaska Sustainable Salmon Fund. So those are kind of our main salmon outlets for information. The North Pacific Fisheries Management Council is important for management decisions and assessments for crab and groundfish in the Bering Sea, and we submit multiple ecosystem chapters that track some of the time series of data that we collect on the survey. So hopefully that is me explaining it makes it a little bit clearer. Next slide. So this survey is really focused on providing ecosystem data in support of NOAA's ecosystem-based fisheries management strategy. And this is important for both sustainable fisheries in the Bering Sea as well as management of subsistence resources. And that speaks more specifically to the Yukon River salmon, management of Yukon River salmon. The goal, as many of these surveys are, share a lot of the similarities, is to really begin to help us understand the impact of the loss of sea ice, and in particular, how it is impacting pelagic fish resources, some of the early life stages of crab and salmon. And this is all kind of framed within the mandates that we have within the Magnuson-Stevens Act and the Pacific Salmon Treaty. So as I said before, it's the survey will start and end in Dutch Harbor, and we'll be collecting samples of oceanographic conditions, CTD, bongos, benthic crabs, beam trawls, surface trawls, and that will help us understand the status of benthic fish and invertebrates, as well as the pelagic fish community. And on these surveys, we always consistently have a seabird observer to monitor the underway sampling of seabird distribution and abundance. Next slide. So I don't know, this is, again, a text-heavy presentation, which is not typical for me, but I think some of the unique aspects that connects the survey to coastal communities is really kind of the work that we provide and the information we provide, on Chinook and chum salmon. And we produce outlooks and run sizes for the Yukon River up to 3 to 4 years in advance. And that's used for planning both for the stakeholders in terms of what they're planning to do, but it's also provided to managers so they can kind of help reach more of a consensus on decisions that are made, rather than it just helps build consensus, particularly across the US and Canada. And the other thing that's somewhat unique about our survey is we sampled the very early life stages of snow crab and the age 0 life stage of walleye pollock. And though that information is somewhat unique, and we provide that information in ecosystem considerations chapters to the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council. Next slide. So we'll have scientists from the Alaska Fisheries Science Center here with NOAA Fisheries, both from Seattle and in Juneau. We have scientists from the Alaska Department of Fish and Game that come to help support the research on salmon, and we also have participants from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to monitor seabirds and marine mammals during the survey. So all the berthing space is allocated as efficient vessels, so we don't have, we have very limited space on the vessel. And as far as collecting additional data or equipment, it's somewhat limited. but it begins with just submitting a sample request for the survey, and so there's a process for supporting a wide range of various sample requests. We get sample requests from universities all ranging from North Carolina to Pacific Northwest and Alaska. So we support that as to the extent that we can. And the data from the survey are archived at the NCEI. And we don't have the full time series there, but hopefully over this next year, we'll get our full time series archived at NCEI. And as I mentioned before, too, it's through the Pacific Salmon Commission's Yukon River Panel and JTC that we engage with tribal groups and local communities within Alaska and the Yukon Territory. And we consistently or have consistently provided a straight science seminar. And we will plan to continue that in the future, as well as continue to provide these ecosystem considerations chapters to the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council. We've been running this survey for about 24 years, so we're fairly insular in what we need. However, one thing I will point out is we'll see how things come together for the North Pacific Research Board's integrated ecosystem research program next year, and I'm anticipating that collaborations will probably and need for collaborations will be higher next year in 2026. Next slide. So just a list of standard oceanographic information in the Northern Bering Sea, and work with benthic grabs and beam trawls provides information on the benthic community, and our information that we collect during our surface trawls provides information on the pelagic fish community. And this is the DOI that has the has both the trawl and CTD data archived at the NCEI. Next slide. I think that's it. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jim. So we are moving into a quick Q&A session. So this session is only slotted for 3 minutes. And keep in mind that we do have a longer session at the end of all the presentations, about 20 minutes, to continue discussion. So I know that there's already been a lot of discussion ongoing in the chat, but if anyone has something that they don't feel has been answered in the chat yet and feels that this shorter Q&A session is a good place to raise that, please raise your hand and make sure to call on you. And yeah, Jackie, I see you're unmuting. I don't know if...
Yeah, no, I'm just sorry. I'm just looking through the different questions that are going on here. To Tom, I don't think it's a space limited. They have a flow through system in there and they have a lot of sensors I can ask, but for the space that it takes for the IFCB, I don't believe that can be put on to the lorry at this time, but I'll proceed with that question, especially not this year because they leave in about a week to Japan. So there's not capability. But right now, that counter that they use is completely packed with.
Right.
That's
right. Yeah, that's what I assume. But thank you. I appreciate that. And I would have maybe tried to go to Nome to set it up and then take it off at Utqiagvik. But yeah, I realize it's a bit last minute at this point. So thanks.
Yeah, but I can ask that question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's see. There was a question. Who was it? Stacy. I think the question about presenting more than the AEWC. We have done it to the Marine Mammal Commission in the past. We have gone out to the communities, particularly in Savunga and Gamble and reported to them, as well as particularly right after January, when they're not hunting. And I have done similar type to the community members up in Utiavik, and we've had some discussions periodically with people at Point Hope. But I understand what you're saying. Let's see what else.
Yeah, Phyllis, I also see you came off mute. If there's anything you want to add. Gay Sheffield, I saw your hand up first.
Yeah, hi. The question about the IFCBs, I think was general questions. I don't know if this is the time to ask that. Is this the time to ask that?
Yeah, we
Might as
can go
well.
ahead and
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the question I have is, and I saw the new website you guys have, and it's great. You break it down into the Bering Chukchi, so people who live in a region can go and kind of click to see what's coming by. So thank you for that. For a region that has had a couple of dangerous blooms, including, the worst, most toxic, most persistent, most massive bloom in the country ever documented, is there, taking the research with these HABs and IFCBs and people that are observing, I'll start again. We have two problems that are about to hit the region, or we believe are about to hit the region. Both are zoonotic, meaning these are problems that animals have that can get into people. And unfortunately, they can get into people, in both cases, strong enough to potentially kill people, if definitely harm people. And that is harmful algae and avian influenza. Are we making sure that the research vessel community is communicating when we have equipment that can provide us real-time data, so that we can say, okay, hey, in August, the month of August is covered. We have from here to here an IFCB floating around out there, and we know those people know how to communicate with the regional hubs. And or if we start seeing dead marine mammals or dead seabirds, does everybody on board understand how to communicate to the federal government, who will then turn around and talk to their co-management partners and or auger right into a region, so that we can go and make sure that the co-management partners and the federal government are aware? And I would not normally bring this up, but these are two things that are going to be time sensitive and human health related, and also conservation concerns, especially avian influenza, if we get it like they've had it with sea lions in the Peruvian coast. Is there any thought, I guess, on, do we know how to answer that question? How many days is the IFCB going to be covered? And maybe we don't, because things are so chaotic right now regarding scheduling and money. But maybe think about one step further. What kinds of immediate data are we collecting on board these vessels or on our own research that is of a level that is really immediately need to know? And I don't know if that's a question or if that's just something to think on, but I appreciate that listening. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gay. I think that those are important things to consider, certainly. And if anyone wants to go ahead and take a stab at it, if anyone has some pertinent thoughts, otherwise we can keep thinking about it and maybe revisit it in the next Q&A and discussions as well. But Thomas, yeah, I see you come off mute.
Yeah. Sorry, just on the ISP, just so everybody's aware, what we've done in the past is, and what we'll continue doing in the future is, based on the final track that the IFCB will be on, which with the Sekuli Act this year on that one leg that Jackie was talking about, there's a little bit of uncertainty. We can put together a list of areas, regions, communities by which the IFCB will be traveling, and then start a list with weekly updates on what it's seeing, and then a process by which we would send advisories in a quick, 24-hour turnaround kind of period if something is detected. That's specific to the IFCB and not to the general, all the other HAB stuff that might be collected. But a lot of the other HAB data that's being collected usually on the research vessels will not be analyzed right there, will not be providing real-time information on HABs. So it's really, as far as I know, the IFCB that really is the thing that produces the real-time data, and at least the IFCB that I'll be deploying on the Sequoiac, that will come with kind of that weekly update on what's happening, and then if something is detected that's worrying, that will be communicated.
Awesome.
And I can't speak to avian influenza.
Yeah. David Allen, I saw I think you're next in the queue.
Yeah, maybe this can be deferred to the larger discussion, but I did see that Liz Lubunsky is on the from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is on the call, and I just wondered whether we have any similar protocols or a protocol developed at all for sharing information about unusual observations of seabirds while we're underway, and wonder whether you wanted to offer any comments there. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, David. Just raise my hand. I was just gonna say, so, as we had in the overview today, we will be participating, I think, in the majority of the cruises that are going on this summer. And we do have plans to report any unusual observations that we might have, whether they're, dead marine birds or marine mammals. Currently, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is part of this Co-Management Council, the Alaska Migratory Bird Co-Management Council, which is a group representing the state of Alaska, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and tribes all across the state. So it's a partnership that we've developed for, gosh, it's probably close to 20 years now. So our plans are, if we do see any unusual observations, our observers would report either back to myself, and I'll connect folks with the Alaska Co-Management Council, just so we can get that information out to communities as soon as it's available. And I would also follow up with Tom or Gay or any other folks that might be interested in the observations that we're seeing, even if it's not relative to one specific region. I think if we're seeing die-offs, like say more in the Southern Bering Sea, I'd still like to share that information with representatives in the council and other partners, just so everybody is aware of what's going on in the larger region this summer.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, and Liz. So I will pass it over to Katie to continue facilitating our second half of presentations. We still have a few more to go, so exciting stuff. And then we'll have time for hopefully a longer discussion at the end. So keep thinking about these things. And Katie, over to you.
Great, thanks so much. And we'll just get right into it. Fiamma, if you are on, you're up next.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, so this project, and you're gonna have to listen because we were pretty sparse in the frenzy of today's science world in putting together the slides, but this is a Navigating the New Arctic project. It's a large team which somehow didn't make it on the cover slide. So I'm just going to mention it involves traditional seagoing people, so biological oceanographers, Matthias Cape and Patty Mattray from Bigelow, Lorenzo Cianelli, he's a fisheries scientist at OSU, a large team from the Greenland Institute of Natural Resources, so Lawrence Meyer, Caroline Bouchard, Carl Zingerson, and Akalu Sorensen, myself, my team, but also an environmental scientist or environmental historian, Mark Carey, Donald Slater from the University of Edinburgh, Helen Seroussi, who's an ice sheet modeler, and Chris Little from AER, Helen is from Dartmouth, who are climate modelers, ice sheet modelers. And the scope of this project is to understand how large-scale climate forcing, so changes in the ice sheet and changes in the ocean, affect Greenland's glacial fjord systems, which are hotspots, relative hotspots of productivity and biodiversity that local communities depend upon for sustenance, so fishing, hunting, and so on. And we picked two environments. This shows the environment in the southeast, which is a large glacial fjord system that is somewhat dominated by a combination of Atlantic and somewhat Atlantic variability, as well as variability coming out of Fram Strait. The other one is the Northwest Greenland, the southern Melville Bay region, and Upernavik, which is dominated more by Arctic variability. And the project itself involves 4 cruises. 2 have already happened, one in 2023 to this region, one in 2024 to the Northwest. We deployed moorings at both sites, did the sampling that I'm going to describe in a minute. And then subsequent cruises 2 years apart per site. This summer is back to Southeast Greenland, and the next year the plan is to go back to Northwest Greenland, recover the moorings, which carry both physical and biogeochemical optical sensors, and conduct surveys. So this is our cruise plan from this year, leaving from Reykjavik and returning to Reykjavik. We are sampling both the continental shelf and the troughs with CTDs, bongo nets, MIC nets, water sampling. I think this is on the next list. And we also have a collaboration at this site with the local schoolmaster. So that's Max Audibert. He's a teacher in a small town on the fjord. We are bringing a polar steam teacher, Precious Simonet from Florida, and hopefully one NPR reporter who is interested. Everybody's interested in Greenland now, but in addressing some of the changes that are happening in Greenland. So that's the plan. And if we can go to the next slide. So the general goal here is we have both a large scale perspective. So we have the climate modelers looking at historical and future variability. And what we're trying to do with the cruise measurements is understand how these large scales affect the small scale. So we need to understand the system itself, how glaciers, ocean affect the fjords and its ecosystem. And so again, we're doing hydrographic survey, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, fluorescence PAR, water samples for biogeochemical analysis. You can read all the things, bongo and MICNET surveys for mesozooplankton and larval fish, stable isotope analysis for some of the food web interactions, and we deploy some moorings, recover some moorings, and deploy several small ones for long-term context. And next slide. This is a picture of one of the towns on the fjords. I think I've already stated this, so we can maybe go to the next one, which, if there is one, maybe not. Yeah, so I should say that in terms of collaboration with local communities, so we've been working with some of these communities for some time, and we've greatly benefited from having Greenland scientists on board. We've also hosted, last year we hosted a Greenland teacher in training. We have a call out for one for this year too, and it was incredibly helpful to have him on board last year because it made our efforts to interact with local schools and local communities really effective. Last year, we did a full day of working with school teachers and school children in the Upernavik region and actually in Kalorsuaq. And this year, we're hoping we have the schoolmaster from a small village in the fjord joined us 2 years ago for 3-4 days, and we did several projects followed on with him and the students, including deploying trackers on icebergs and sending tracts to the students, deploying art by the students on icebergs, and working on some community projects. Because we were there, we were also able to respond to some small requests of sampling some of the local region for pollutants. There were concerns about motor oil being dumped in some of the areas where they harvest algae for, let's say, seaweed for food consumption. And so we collected some of these samples. We've sampled for mercury in the past. And so the fact that we've been returning to these sites has really made it much easier to understand what questions the communities might have and how we can maybe collect some measurements that can help answer them. Tarayok is a great ship. It's a ship that belongs to the Greenland Institute of Natural Resources. Right now it's full of people, including some of the teachers. But if you can always email me if interested, if anybody cancels. It might be possible to add equipment. You can definitely contact me. Our data is all deposited at the Arctic Data Center, at some of it at BICO Demo. And yes, we've been working with the local communities for a while. So that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. We'll move on to coastal freeze, and I believe, Jim, you are presenting today.
Yeah, hi everyone. Maddie Smith is the lead PI and chief scientist in this NSF project, and Jim, and that's me, and Emily are the co-PIs, and Maddie's busy with another field project right now, so I will take you through a few quick slides. Overall, the project is, as it's named, about freeze up that happens in the fall along the coast. So we have 2 efforts this year. The first is in September. We'll have a short trip on the Ukpik, the small charter vessel that operates out of Prudhoe Bay. We'll deploy some moorings. And then October 19th to November 11th, we'll be on the Sikuliaq, starting in Nome and ending in Dutch Harbor. We will service those moorings, and then we'll also do some process studies where we'll set up transects and try to observe a few storms in the fall. So, late October, early November, things should be freezing up. We should be seeing a lot of ice formation and what will eventually become the landfast ice along the coast. And so those are the processes we're trying to get at. It's very much a physics and marine geology focused project. We're trying to see the freeze up process as it happens. You can see on these maps here where we're working, and you can see a zoom in of Harrison Bay, just a little bit to the west of Prudhoe Bay, where we've got a total of 9 mooring sites and some transect lines that span about 5-meter water depth out to about 30-meter water depth. So you can see we're sort of on the inner shelf of the general zone. And some of the other details are that we have a community observer who's coming from UIC Science. We think that'll be Lloyd Pickup Jr., if anybody knows him. And he will be helping us, coordinate with any whaling activity that's happening this late in the year. Probably most of the communities are done with whaling, but we certainly are going to be, regularly communicating through him where we are, what we're doing, and making sure the communities are aware, because we'll be, pretty close. We'll be going around Utqiagvik, and then we'll be close enough to Nuiqsut and other communities. We have an outreach team that is funded as part of the project, and they are coming along to do video and photos and things and some live streams, and they're setting us up with a classroom, a middle school science curriculum at each of our local areas back home. So it's one in Seattle, one in Corvallis, and one in Massachusetts, and then we'll make the broadcast available to a wider middle school targeted audience, but we'll have specific classrooms we're also working with, and then they'll have a website with all that material and whatnot. And I don't know if it's still on this slide, but we are continuing to do some work in Kaktovik, which is the village further to the east, where we set up a curriculum in the last couple of years on a previous project, and we're going to keep going with that, but not this year. That's a 27 effort. One other outreach thing will be part of the BARC, the Barrow Arctic Research Center Science Fair this summer in early August. Okay, next slide. Okay, so our key questions are, how does freeze up happen in the fall right near the coastline? There's typically a lot of cold, dry air over the land that comes out and takes the heat out of a very thin, shallow water column pretty quickly, so you can make ice in the shallows pretty quickly. But there's also everything happening further offshore in that, the pack ice advancing southward, and there's lots of storms and events that sort of can accelerate that, or actually in some cases can decelerate that, because you can mix up heat that's been stored near the surface of the ocean over the course of the summer. So we're interested in all those things, and we're interested in how much sediment is involved in that. So if you've spent any time around landfast ice, you've probably seen that it can be filthy. It can be really just laden with lots of sediment. So we want to try to understand how sediment's nucleating in the ice formation process, and then where it goes, where it gets transported. So pretty heavily based on moorings and drifting buoys, lots of autonomous systems, ship-based systems, etc. And I didn't make it into this slide, but I'm really excited to announce, especially with Shayna up next, that all of our buoys are now available in the Backyard Buoys app. We put 10 of them out at Utqiagvik a couple weeks ago, and you can see them there now. And everything we do going forward, it should all just be available to everyone on Backyard Buoys, which is really exciting because the communities are definitely using it. Shayna's done an awesome job getting the communities going with that program, and now it's the place they look for stuff. So, we just had to get our stuff into that pipeline, and now the communities have it. I'm really excited about that. Okay, next slide should be the last one. So this is important to the communities, I think, because of the coastal process. Coastal change is happening very, very fast, and there's big seasonal cycles, and then there are these longer trends of just a very vulnerable and eroding coastline. So we're trying to understand how the landfast ice forms, and then how its formation process affects its fate the next spring when it eventually breaks out. When will it break out is a key question for the communities. Also a really essential scientific question, in my opinion. So we think that some of the freeze up process is the precursor to all that. And that's really where we're going with trying to understand that freeze up process, is to understand this key part of the seasonal cycle that we think controls the coastal ice. Okay, Maddie's email's down there. You can also email me. I'm happy to take questions in the chat or later in the Q&A. Over.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, and for the great lead into our next talk with Shayna about Backyard Buoys.
Yeah, thanks for that tee up, Jim. I appreciate it. If we can go back to that first slide again, just to point out, this is the funding sources in a NSF Convergence Accelerator through this August. And then it's funded through the NOAA Inflation Reduction Act through AUs through July 2029. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty with what's going on with that funding right now, but we're moving forward with our co-lead here with AWC. Jenny's the point of contact, but Leslie Hobson and John Hobson are also very involved in the program. All right, thanks. Next slide. So generally, these are deployed we have an expansion of the program with Quinnahock in the Cusco Bay area. So they're looking to deploy hopefully in early June. The rest of them will be in kind of mid to late July. It all depends on when the ice opens up and when the facilitators in the communities are available to get out. But what we're doing right now is all of the permits have been submitted. So the goal is we have 3 out of the Quinnahock, and you can kind of see the 3 regions there on the lower right. And then the plans for the Arctic are Sabunga, Gamble, Point Hope, Wainwright, Utqiagvik, Nuiqsut, and Kaktovik. And there's a few different numbers. Kind of, again, it depends on the village facilitators and what they want to put out. But all of the locations have been picked by whaling captains through many years of working with the AWC and then the individual whaling captains associations. And we have some facilitators like Kunuk and Frederick Brower in Barrow that have been doing this for a long time, for the last 2 years. So they're going to be putting these out probably in late to mid to late July. And then they're picked up kind of as the ice is coming in, so that October timeframe. The vessels it's deployed by whaling captains in the communities, so it's their individual vessels. They go from the smaller aluminum skiffs in the smaller communities, and Kunuk has a bigger one there out of Barrow. Once the buoys are deployed, we will put the word out through the IARPC, through Coast Guard, and then we have a Facebook page, the app, we have a website. So we're trying to really get the word out. And I'll put a few links in the chat on where you can get it. I think that's it for all the locations. Next slide. So this program has been developed over the last few years, and it's really about enabling and empowering Indigenous and coastal communities to gather and use wave data. The app that was developed was through interaction and feedback from all of the communities we're working with, because we're actually working with Pacific Islands and Pacific Northwest as well. And the goals really are this co-production and bridging Western science with technology. It's providing another tool in the toolbox for making decisions out at sea. So the villages deploy and steward the wave buoys for the open water season, and then the real-time data are available on the app and the AUS website. Next slide. So this research is really important because the wave information is key to safety, making decisions. John Hobson tells a great story of when they first put him out, he didn't really trust him. And then he went out and the waves were like at 5-6 feet. So he kind of got rocked. And realized that it was really nice to be able to wake up in his bed, look at the app, and make a decision right there of whether he's going to go out on the water or he's going to go inland and do hunting. So the whaling captains decide where they want it. They deploy and steward it. The real-time information is available on the app. The information is also available for others to download on the AUS portal. This was voted on by AWC to share the data. And then this information is also shared with the National Weather Service, and that's actually being automatically ingested now for improved marine forecasts. Next slide. Here's the information on how you can find the data. So I put it in the chat. We have a website with the link. The app is now live. It's downloadable on both iPhone app and the Google Play. And then we have the data on our portal. And then there's information on that the Backyard Buoys website, where if you're deploying SOFAR buoys, if others are deploying SOFAR buoys, and there's quite a few others being deployed in regions. I think the Navy is doing some out of Point Lay. So we have it set up where it's easy for them to add the information in so that it shows up on the app. That's called the Friends of Backyard Buoys. And as Jim talked about, working with University of Washington with Troy and his group there, they were able to work with Jim on getting these data from the Swift buoys on this. So we're excited to be able to share as much information as we can on these apps. I think that next slide. So yeah, expedition participation, these are coastal communities. The scientists are the coastal communities. And the data are available for others to collaborate on. See the previous slide. This is all community-based. It's working with AWC. They're the lead on this. And next slide. And the key parameters. So SOFAR Ocean has a lot of different buoy options now. We're kind of sticking with the basics, just wave height, wave direction, wave period, and sea surface temperature. There is on the SOFAR dashboard, if you were to go to just the SOFAR, it shows wind data. That's an algorithm. We showed very clearly that it was not correct in the nearshore, so we actually removed that from the app. And the data are deposited. You can find it for all 3 regions on our Backyard Buoys website. And then on our AUS data portal, the data are available from the other 2 years that you can download. And if you have information in the Spectra data that we actually pulled from the SD card, please reach out to me and I can make that accessible to you as well. I think that's it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Moving right along, Pacific Walrus Research Cruise. And Irina, I believe you're presenting today.
Yep. Thank you, Katie. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. Thank you. So I am Irina Turkanova. I am a project co-lead on behalf of Fish and Wildlife Service. And another project co-lead here is Dr. William Beatty with U.S. Geological Survey. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to participate in this meeting today. And next slide. So our Pacific Walrus research cruise is about to start in less than a month here, and we are going to be leaving from Nome on June 2nd, and we will be working in Northern Bering and Chukchi Sea until June 30th, when we are going to be going back to Nome, and we will be working on board the research vessel Norseman 2. As a preparation, for our research cruise, we have presented our fieldwork plans to the communities of Campbell, Sibunga, Utqiagvik, as well as to the executive committee of the Eskimo Walrus Commission. And we are going to be sending letters and follow up with phone calls to all the stakeholders and coastal communities to let them know about our fieldwork plans, and also during the cruise, whenever our vessel will be working within 50 nautical miles from each individual communities, we will be notifying them as well and coordinate with them in order not to interfere with subsistence activities. Next slide, please. So the mission of our project is to evaluate Pacific walrus population dynamics. And the primary goal here is obviously to collect data to inform the population models for this work. Specifically during the cruise, we are going to be collecting skin biopsy samples from Pacific walruses hauled out on sea ice. And for that, we are going to be using rigid hull inflatable boats, skiffs, to approach walrus groups. And we will be using crossbows with custom-made arrows with biopsy tips to collect skin biopsies for genetic analysis from those walruses. At the same time, concurrently, we'll be collecting age structure data from walrus groups hauled out on ice that we encounter. Next slide. So why is this important? Well, we all know that the Pacific walrus is a vital cultural and subsistence resource for indigenous communities, both in Alaska as well as in Chukotka, Russia. And even though at this point, we believe that Pacific walrus population is stable based on the best scientific data available, but we do think that sea ice loss will likely result in the population decline in the near future. And this project is going to help us understand the rate and the magnitude of this decline, and also continue to assess the sustainability of the subsistence walrus harvest. At the same time, we hope that the data that we are collecting will be helpful to take any proactive management and conservation actions whenever and wherever they are necessary. Next slide. So the cruise participants will include scientists from both Fish and Wildlife Service and U.S. Geological Survey. We will also have 3 Alaska Native hunters, walrus hunters, on board as full research participants. We are fully staffed for this season. We don't have any berth space available at the time, and we don't really have any additional collaboration needs. At the time, however, there are always possibilities to collaborate, opportunities to collaborate for next season. So happy to discuss that if anybody has any ideas. We are going to be collecting some opportunistic data and samples for our partners and collaborators, including harmful algal bloom samples, as well as helping out with microplastics study, collecting data on walrus hormones and diet composition and nutrients, and some other studies as well. So if you have some data needs, please reach out to myself or Bill B, and we're happy to discuss the opportunities to collaborate there. Next slide. And so this is going to be the second out of 3-year long project to examine Pacific walrus population dynamics. So we are hoping to do another cruise in 2026. And once the series of cruises is completed, we are going to be able to estimate the abundance, survival, reproductive rates, and population trend for the Pacific walrus. And once the project is done and data are processed, it's all going to be publicly available according to DOI policy, and will be published on Alaska Science Center Walrus Data webpage. And I think that is all I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And on to Bering Strait Mooring Project with Rebecca.
Hello, last talk. So yeah, so this is the Bering Strait Mooring Project with my co-PI Cecilia Peralta Ferrez, who's somewhere on the call, I believe. And this has been a very long-term program. So we started doing this in 1990. So we're up to 35 years now with the mooring collections this summer. Funding source currently is the NSF Arctic Observing Network. And if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so our cruise follows immediately on from the Walrus cruise there. So we're going the Norseman 2, Nome to Nome, from the 2nd to the 10th of July. There's our project website. This is our very ambitious, if the weather is good and there are no problems, sort of cruise track. We do some variety of this every year. It's been stuck in the south the last because of various problems and weather and various other things. So that's roughly what we plan to do. We have, in terms of outreach, our project website, we have Strait Science scheduled for Nome this year. So I'm pleased to have we got that sorted out, Gay. Thank you for sorting that out for us. And we do skill outreach programs in Seattle. Next slide, please. Our motivation is to try and understand change and in the oceanic flow through the Bering Strait. So we are mostly providing the backbone, if you like, to many of these other studies, a long-term view of the temperature, salinity, ice thickness. That's a new data set, which I'm just finalizing right now. Those background properties of the system, which allow other people to understand what's going on with their data from that. We have moorings in the strait, which are measuring generally hourly, if not more often than that. And we want to understand what is changing, why it's changing, what the impacts are. This cruise focuses on getting our moorings and replacing them and taking sections, hydrographic sections and nutrient and trace metal water samples to give us some framework for those mooring measurements. Next slide, please. So why is it important? Well, you can read this as well as I can. We're trying to find out how much water goes through the strait, what its properties are, especially its nutrient content. That's a new focus for us, where it's going, how these are changing. What we're seeing generally is a warming and a freshening and a flow increase over the 35 years, though recent years seem to be bucking that trend a little bit. So that's quite interesting. We also suggest, as I'll talk a bit in a minute, that the flow through the nutrient flux of the strait has increased. And we want to see how the physical properties then impact other things like sea ice. It's been shown that the best predictor of sea ice retreat is the heat flux that comes in, the oceanic heat flux that comes in through the Bering Strait. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, so you allowed us extra slides, so I put in some things that we do with these data so you can see what's going on. There's a lot of detail so we can get through it quite quickly. This is the annual means from the moorings, which show the flow has increased over this period of time, and we think we can link that to changes in winds in the Arctic and the Bering Sea. Okay, next. This is how the temperatures increase to general warming, but what you see there, some cold years come back in even quite recent times. I have to make it bigger to see myself. I put it here as annual means, and then on the right there's also how that varies from month to month. This is the salinity, which is more of a physical oceanographer thing that helps drive flow in the Arctic and understand how flow changes in the Arctic. And some of the winters we've seen have been remarkably salty, and some have some incredible fresh periods, which is changing where these waters enter the Arctic Ocean, because typically the winter Bering Strait waters will go in quite deep into the Arctic Ocean, but for a period there, they weren't reaching down and affecting that layer. And with these data, we can work out the heat and saltwater fluxes that go into the freshwater fluxes that go into the Arctic. And this gives us ideas of how these things impact the retreat of sea ice, because this is the heat flux that comes in here is a trigger which sets off the sea ice retreat in the region. Okay, let's have the next. Please, what happens next? Yeah, we still have a record length flow increase, warming and freshening over the period. Okay, next, please. And we can skip through these quite quickly. This is reasons why you might, there you go, very good. This is reasons why we might care about this. What comes through the Bering Strait dominates what goes in the Chukchi, and covers the top 50 meters of the half of the Arctic Ocean. As I said, melts, sets off ice melt, provides a third of fresh water. But I think this last one is almost the most interesting, that almost all the nutrients in the upper 50 meters of the Arctic come through the Bering Strait. And obviously all the nutrients that we find in the Chukchi come from the Bering Strait. And the Bering Strait nutrient flux has actually never been directly measured until last year. So if we, next slide. This was our first year of mooring measurements through the strait. And again, there's far too much information here, but we show that the nutrient content, which is depleted in the summer as the ecosystems have eaten down all the nutrients, bounces back quite quickly in about November, as you see here, and stays high through all the winter and is high across the rest of the strait. Now, a lot of this variability you can tie to primary productivity. Hit return again. Yeah, you see you've got primary productivity here in the spring, which brings up the chlorophyll and brings down the nitrate. So the processes that are going on here as much as we expect, but it allows us to actually quantify these numbers by having a year-round measurement, which we can argue is representative of the entire strait flow. Okay, hit return again. The nitrate replenishes across the whole strait in winter, which currently in the US channel, it's very low in summer, so it's interesting we get those numbers back up high in winter again. And we can skip over that point about reoxygenation. But we can show now that we can have a, we can quantify a flux of nitrate into the Arctic. There's a number there, probably not going to mean very much to many people, but it gives us a number we can relate to inputs from other places, and we find that it's very big. But also we can tie this into our long-term measurements and see that the flow that we believe the nitrate flux into the Arctic has increased over the last 35 years. So hit the turn once more. This was originally a result from satellite data where they found Arctic productivity had increased, and they hypothesized it had to be fueled from the flux of nutrients through the Bering Strait. Okay, return again. We show that the flow increases over that time, and what we can do now, having some idea of how the nutrients vary over the year, we can convert that increase in the flow to look at an increase in the nitrate flux. So you hit again once more, return once more. This final plot here with the nice increasing line shows you our best estimate of the nitrate flux. It's based on 1 year of nitrate data, a seasonal cycle of 1 year of nitrate data. And you ask, well, can you take that trend out by reasonable changes in nutrient content? And you can't, pretty much. So just because the flow has increased so significantly, it means pretty much the nitrate flux of the strait has to have increased. Okay, hit return a few more times. These give some idea, some numbers, so you see how much it is. So we're looking at maybe a 30% increase in flux over 30 years. That's a little speculative because this is a model, but that's really what we're looking at. We're saying we possibly can't reverse that change with that. One more hit return. So we conclude that nitrate flux of the strait has likely increased. Okay, next, where we collaborate, this expedition is going to have people from Seattle and from Oregon. There might be berth space. Contact me if you're interested. We might be able to take other stuff. As before, we are doing a glider for other people. The data is widely available. If you contact us, if there's other products that you'd like. And I'd just like to say too, we have just managed to get the ice thickness record from the Bering Strait altogether. So we've got about 23 years of ice thickness data, which are on the point of being released, I hope. Just doing the analysis there. Okay, so that's really what I wanted to say. Yes, we'd love to collaborate more widely with local communities. Please reach out if there's anything you think we can do for you. And what I'd like other people to do for us is just don't run things into our moorings. That's all. Thank you. Oh yeah, okay, data to be collected. Yeah, this is the list. So.
Great, thank you. So we're gonna go into Q&A for, I'm gonna stop sharing so we can all talk together. So we're gonna take if anybody has questions for the last group that we just heard from, the last 5 presentations, we'll take those first, and then we'll hopefully get into a little bit of a short discussion about anything. So who's got a question?
Hey there, it's Jim. I just wanted to clarify something. I got so excited about the backyard buoys thing. It's a 2-step process. Our Swift buoys that we make here in house that are different from the SOFAR spotter buoys, although similar in a lot of ways. They're not on the apps yet. They're on the website. So if you go to the Backyard Buoys website, like that's the web version that looks a lot like the app, they work there. For Android and iPhone, probably like a couple weeks from now. It's in the pipeline. It's happening, but I just, wanted to clarify that.
Bob, go ahead.
Hi, this is a question/comment for Jackie. So Jackie, I was really pleased to see on the August to Kuliak cruise that you're going to be doing the Bering Strait section. And I also was doubly pleased to see that you're going to do some measurements in Bering Strait on the Laurier cruise. So I just wanted to mention to you that for a number of years now, I've thought that the Bering Strait line should become a DBO line. Okay, call it DBO 2.5 or DBO/BS or whatever. And, I say that with, a little tongue in cheek, but not completely, because, as Rebecca just pointed out so clearly to us, Bering Strait is hugely important. And one of the amazing things about the DBO program, as you well know, is the buy-in. And so many different ships from different nations occupy these lines, and we're collecting this amazing data set. So Rebecca can't do Bering Strait all through the summer and into the fall. So I think that if we were to somehow make this more official somehow, or at least talk it up more now, so that, all these different international PAG members and others can just get it into their minds how important it is to do this Bering Strait line, so that we can continue the time series of Bering Strait along with those DBO lines. So that's my pitch about that. And one small little particular thing for you is that I noticed in the Laurier schematic that you put up there, it looked like you had 3 stations in Bering Strait. So maybe I could give a plea to you to make that at least 5, so that we can make a vertical.
Well, let me answer you, Bob, because we used to do 6. It was a standard thing until the state of Alaska said you could not go into their waters within 5 of either side without having a pilot on board, and taking a pilot from then Dutch Harbor, and that's our limitation. And we talked with NSF before and with the Arctic Research Commission, and there has been, because you can go in and out of waters like around Kodiak and so forth, but we can't bring the Laurier. That's why there's only the 3 stations. This is the minimum, and the 3 nautical miles apart, but that's our limitation. If we could get the state, because we can't afford to put a pilot on for that period of time. The second thing on the Sikuliak, I think that's, you're right. And then, whether it's the DBO line, it's a standard. Anytime we've always gone through Bering Strait, we've tried to make that happen, but you're right. And we could bring that up in there, but we'll never be able to get it with the Canadians or Copri or Jamstick, because they can't come within those real near shore line, the ones that we used to have. So we used to have 6 stations that went from Wales to Little Diomede, and we go boom, 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 like you would want, and Rebecca would want.
So maybe, this is above my pay grade, but, maybe we can start with program managers on the line here. Maybe we can start to have some discussion to try to make that possible. I do know that a foreign vessel last summer did XCTDs across a good portion of the strait. I don't know if they were constrained with what you just said, Jackie, but I don't know, maybe we can think about having a discussion at some point about bringing this forward to try to make it accessible to the other nations. Just, and you can use this 15 years now of DBO data and how successful it's been as ammunition to say how important this is.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say, when we used to do that on the Laurier, there were people that were caught without a helicopter for a month, and they had medical issues, and we would talk the captain into saying, okay, this is a medical, and we would take those people on board the ship and take them over to Wales where they could get on. And we used to do that type of thing, bring the priest over who couldn't get off the island, or brought them back and forth. We did a lot of that, and we can't even visit the communities anymore because we're not allowed to come near the coast. So it would be something in the right time and place. We could bring this issue forward again, but that's why we're not doing it now.
Yeah, and it's a state law, Bob. People here that are with the federal government can't help us. We did talk to Kelly Faulkner at NSF about it. It's just a state of Alaska law. The Port Pilots Association got to the legislature, and so it has to be fixed at the state level.
Okay, well,
Jackie, how close can you come?
No closer than 3 miles.
3 miles.
okay.
We'll do a lot.
So that's 3 miles from the coast and 3 miles from Little Diomede? Okay, so you can fit more than 3 stations in there.
Well, no, it's not.
I don't want to push that anymore.
I believe it's 5 nautical miles from the state, because I'm always being asked I need extra permits in state water. So I think it's 5, which is why we're condensed to that. But we could check that out. Regardless, we just can't get near people on either side of the island either side of that strait, nor the sampling.
Okay, well, let me know if I can help, or if anyone can help to try to.
Yeah, I don't think we should abandon it. I think it's a multitude of issues for this year.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any additional questions, or oh, David, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for everyone for entertaining the changes that we did in the template, and for coming and giving such amazing presentations every year. I'm always amazed at the quality of the presentations and the depth of these presentations. And I'm always a little bit frustrated that we almost never have enough time for all the discussions that we clearly need to be having here. So I've been taking lots of notes and asking questions in our notes document, and I've noted in particular that we need to have some discussion about HABs, seabird, and marine mammal communications as sort of a key priority walking out of this discussion. And I flagged some participants, but we will try to find a time to keep moving that discussion forward. And there are also other ways that we can possibly break up these meetings and possibly even do mashups with straight science, assuming that Gay and others might be willing to entertain those ideas to try to reach more communities as well. But anyway, just wanted to say thank you, and this has been a really amazing discussion. And we will find time to continue to move forward with a lot of the topics that we've just had the opportunity to touch upon today. Thanks, Katie.
So I can't find the raise my hand, so I'm just going to start yapping. This is Cal Morty at University of Washington PMEL, and I was wondering, Shana, are there, we at the AMSS meeting, we have the Thursday or Wednesday night where we go through all the Arctic cruises that are coming on. Were there any that were missed here? Do you think we covered everybody? And then I know that Josh Shu Zhang has the Arctic Air program, and I know that there will be flights going out this year. But I'm just wondering, who else did we miss, if anybody?
Yeah, I was actually just making that list. Thanks, Cal, as you were thinking through it. Yeah, what we have on some of those other ones are the air flights. So right now there's NOAA surveys going on for ice eels. So there was a few other aircraft surveys that were not included in this, but I think the rest of them, we got all of them.
Man, if everyone's quiet, I'll just keep talking. So to Phyllis or Seth, if you're on here, Rebecca shows these trends, and how well are these reflected in your time series that you have that are further downstream?
So there's warming also. Some of the trends appear at the M8 mooring. which Calvin is the one that you use to see, compare to nitrate and that type of thing. And so some of those trends are appearing at M8, but some of them aren't. And I think it's dependent on how much of M8 is seeing the water in Anadir and how much M8 is seeing just the 70-meter, 100-meter ice flow. And that needs to be looked at.
Okay, with that, we are at the top of the hour, unfortunately. It definitely was nice to at least give people more time to get their presentations and not have to count down by the second, even if that meant a little less discussion time. But I think we have some good ideas for some future meetings going forward. And just a reminder, if anybody has ideas on how they want to collaborate, FOCP is here to help facilitate meetings and meeting spaces. So please reach out to us so we can continue discussions like these. So with that, I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of their day and good luck with everybody in their field work.
Hey, Shanna, can you stay down for a sec? I was just going to say the one thing that wasn't included perhaps was the LTER. I missed the first part of the meeting, and maybe we should be reaching out to the LTER group that's working off the North Slope as well. Future meetings.
You mean Ken Dutton's group out of Cocktail?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, David, I can add that to the list of maybe that's something we can reach out to Ken and his group because they have and then the other thing I just thought about was North Slope Borough. So I didn't see Leandra. They do some deployments there too. I don't know if they're doing some this year, but that might be one that's missing.
Those are all great points, and I've captured Arctic Air, the LTER, and North Slope Borough, and yeah, I think there's lots of opportunity for us to keep on improving.
This is Heather. Josh Shu knew about the meeting today. She just couldn't attend. I just put the notes on the flights. She's not going to Nome this year. It's just Kotzebue. So I did put those dates in there, and I'm working with her on the flyer and Alex, for you guys who know him, Alex Whiting up in Kotzebue. It would be helpful to see the list ahead of time too, because I had asked Meredith, or not Meredith, but MB, to see it. And there was a couple, I just knew that there's a lot of surveys also not going this year, something I reviewed with Phyllis. So it's hard to know who's been contacted and who's not. But I think obviously, Shana, you always have the list. David, you have the list between Calvin, me, it would be good just to see it ahead of time. So I think people can say, oh, that person's missing. And then also, so we can make sure that our community partners are invited too. I mean, Gay's at least looped in. It was nice to see Stacy here, but I mean, Emma wasn't here this year. The person in Nome who's going out on the Walrus cruise, she's not here. We didn't get Norton Sound Health included. So I think there's a lot of partners that are missing. And I don't expect to see AEWC folks on here, but that's also a personal invite any one of us could send.
Yeah, Heather, I think we're always looking to increase our lists. We have a handful of listers and people that we contact every year, but we would definitely appreciate any and all help to make sure that we reach everybody. This is definitely supposed to be an inclusive effort.
Yeah, you guys do a great job. I just, we're all super swamped and busy, but I think sometimes just seeing the list just gets us thinking about it ahead of time when we go, oh yeah, that meeting's next week. We should make sure all these people are there. So that's all.
Yeah, I think this is also just a challenging year. I think everybody's swamped and also living in a great, sometimes existential uncertainty that has resulted in reticence to do a lot of public presentations. So I hope it was a nice, relatively small group of presentations that we had this year, and I think the presentations themselves were extraordinary. But yeah, we'll continue to strive to improve who we reach, how we reach, and expand that coverage so that we're as inclusive as possible. All good points, Heather, and I could work with y'all to improve that.
And David, I was thinking, just because I reached out to you yesterday, like, hey, do you want, it might be helpful, just because I am involved in the research planning night and all of that, if you guys reach out to me with the planning of this, because then we can also advertise through our networks, through the OA network, through all the different stuff. So
Perhaps everybody would like to be advertising
yeah,
through
that
their
would be
networks.
awesome.
So I think
Yeah.
that's a really great idea, Shayna.
Yeah.
Ooh, I love
would
the
add
idea of crowdsourcing.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
I would add inviting native villages.
Agree.
If that's Katie, I think that's you were asking who to ask. I would send emails and calls to tribal coordinators along the coast if that's what you want to do. And I'd also say thank you very much. Shayna brought up aircraft are not added on the list, and we currently have, and there's been questions raised. Though I have to say NOAA did a good job of coming up here and going out to communities on St. Lawrence Island, meeting with tribal leadership to make sure that there would be understanding and change plans if they need to regarding their aircraft flyovers. So that's been good. But I think for people to know, the aircraft are kind of have their own history, and it would be great to know where aircraft, at least for the marine environment, if we're sticking just to the marine, but anywhere in the Arctic, that's something that also should probably be hooked in with the state of Alaska as well, if you're looking at land-based aircraft as well. Thank you. And thanks for this meeting. I'm out.
Bye, Kay.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Oh, you too.
Have a good one.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.